Hello, everyone. Hopefully, if you were in that session, you will be able to watch this video and we will not have any technology issues. If you were in that session, thank you for sticking it out. This was not expected today, and evidently, I'm getting emails from other teachers. They also are having the same issues we did today. So I think it was a school-wide problem, not just us. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go over and I'm going to talk about Pyramus and Thisbe. I know I'm just going to start from the beginning, obviously for students who weren't there. But what I want to do is kind of get your thinking going about why would we be reading this before reading Romeo and Juliet? So that's kind of the discussion point I want you to keep in your head. So as we get started, I mentioned earlier that you could say Pyramus or Pyramus. I always say Pyramus. But I've heard it pronounced both ways, so it's totally up to you. But when Pyramus and Thisbe, who were known the one most handsome of all the youthful men and the loveliest of all Eastern girls, lived in adjoining houses near the walls that Queen Samaras had built of brick around her famous city, they grew fond and loved each other, meeting often there. And as the days went by, their love increased. They wished to join in marriage, but that joy their fathers had forbidden them to hope. And yet the passion that with equal strength inflamed their minds, no parent could forbid. No relatives had guessed their secret love, for all their converse was by nods and signs. And as smoldering fire may gather heat, and more to smothered, so their love increased. So one of the questions was, what can you infer that Pyramus and Thisbe look like? So some of you in that Sunday highlighted that uh, Pyramus was youthful and handsome, and that Thisbe was the loveliest of all Eastern girls. So they were very attractive, right? So, and the other question was, why did Pyramus and Thisbe love each other? And what a lot of you highlighted was that their parents forbid them, their fathers forbid them. And that also one of the things that if you look at is that they had their only connection with each other was that of nods and like smiles. So there was kind of that forbidden love. So that kind of made uh, that grow a little bit deeper for them. So it says the only way that they were able to communicate was by the nods and signs and that smoldering fire gathering heat. So by being forced to stay away from each other, that just wanted to make them be around each other more. So now it so happened a partition built between their houses many years ago was made defective with a little chink. So a chink is like a hole in the wall. A small defect observed by none, although for ages there, but was hidden from love. Our lovers found the secret opening and used its passage to convey little sounds of gentle murmured words, whose tuneful note passed oft, and safety though that hidden away. So basically, that little hole in the wall, that's how they communicated with each other, and they were able to speak without no one finding out that they were talking. There, many a time, they stood on either side, Thisbe on one and Pyramus the other. And when their warm breath touched from lip to lip, their signs were such as this: the envious wall, why art thou standing in the way of those who would die for love? What harm could happen thee shouldst thou permit us to enjoy our love? But what if we ask much? Let us persuade that thou wilt open while we kiss but once. For we are not ungrateful. Unto thee we own our debt. Here thou last, here thou hast left a way that breathed words may enter loving ears. So vain whispered they, and when the night began to darken, they exchanged farewells. May presence that they kissed a fond farewell, vain kisses that to love might none avail. So The question here was, how did they communicate with each other? So we kind of mentioned that is they were able to communicate each other because there was a little hole in the wall, right? So what's interesting here is in the part where it's quoted, they're actually talking to the wall. So like, why are you standing in the way of those who would die for love? Like we would die for each other. And then they say, could you just open for 1 second so we can kiss? But then they're like, well, we're not ungrateful for you because you're the reason that we've been able to communicate for all this time, right? So it's interesting here that they're talking to the wall. So when John removed the glimmering lamps of light and the light sun had, hold on 1 second, my phone was ringing. When dawn removed the glimmering lamps of light and the bright sun had dried the dewy grass again, they met where they had told their love. And now complaining of their hapless fate in murmurs gentle, they at last resolved a way to slip upon the quiet night, elude their parents, and as soon as free, quit the great builded city and their homes. Fearful to wander in the pathless fields, they chose a trysting place, the tomb of Ninus, where safely they might hide unseen, beneath the shadow of a tall mulberry tree, covered with snow-white fruit, close by a spring. All is arranged according to their hopes, and now the daylight seeming slowly moved, sinks in the deep waves, and the tardy night arrives from the spot where the day declines. So the question is what is their plan? So in the session, some of you had mentioned their plan was they're going to meet and they're going to try to elude their parents, which means they're going to try and slip away or trick their parents. And they're going to meet near a mulberry tree that's near the tomb of Ninus. So that's what their plan is to meet. Quickly, the clever Thisbe, having first deceived her parents, opened the door. She flitted in the silent night away, and having veiled her face, reached the great tomb and sat beneath the tree. Love made her bold. There, as she waited, a great lioness approached the near-by spring to quench her thirst. Her frothing jaws incarnadined with blood of slaughtered oxen. As the moon was bright, Thisbe could see her, and affrighted, fled with trembling footstep to a gloomy cave. And as she ran, she slipped and dropped her veil, which fluttered to the ground. She did not dare to save it. Wherefore, when the savage beast had taken a great draught and slaked her thirst, and thence had turned to seek her forest lair, she found it on her way, and full of rage, tore it and stayed it with her bloody jaw. But Thisbe, fortunate, escaped unseen. So, what caused Thisbe to flee to the cave? Well, obviously, it's the lioness, right? So, one of the important things I want you to look at is when she was running to the cave, she dropped her veil. And when she dropped her veil, the lioness, as she was heading back to the forest, saw it. And when she did, she had just drank from that stream. And so she was tearing the veil up. And when she did, she still had blood in her mouth. So now the veil was bloody because she had ripped it apart. Okay, so let's see what happens next. Now Pyramus had gone out too soon. Now Pyramus had not gone out so soon as Thisbe to the tryst. And when he saw the certain traces of that savage beast imprinted in the yielding dust, his face went white with fear. But when he found the veil covered with blood, he cried. So he's thinking he saw the footprints of the lioness, and then he saw the blood covered veil, and he's like, "Oh no! Alas, one night that caused the ruin of two lovers. Thou wert most deserving and completed days, or deserving of completed days. But as for me, my heart is guilty. I destroyed thee, O my love. I bade thee come out of the dark night and to a lonely haunt, and failed to go before thee. Oh, whatever lurks beneath this rock, though ravenous lion, tear my guilty flesh, and with the most cruel jaws devour my cursed entrails. What? Not so. It is a craven's part to wish for death. So, what he's doing is he thinks that he has pretty much like led her to her death and that the lioness killed her, but we all know that he is in the or that she is in the she's in the cave hiding, right? But he doesn't know that. So that's a form of irony, right? Where we know something that the characters don't. So remember that. So when he is in the trying to like figure out what's going on, he's like, he wants the lion to come and kill him because he feels so bad. But then he's like, you know what? Nope, that's a coward's way to wish for death, and I'm not a coward. So he stopped briefly and took up the veil, went straight away to the shadow of the tree, and as for tears, bedewed, then well-known bedewed the well-known veil, he kissed it oft and sighing said, "Kisses and tears are thine, receive my blood as well." And he embrued, so embrued is stained, the steel girt at his side, deep in his bowels. He plucked it from the wound, and a faint with death, as he fell back to the earth, his spurting blood shot upward in the air. So when the decay has rift a leaden pipe, a hissing jet of water spurts on high. By the dark tide, the berries on the tree assumed a deeper tint, for as the roots soaked up the blood pendant, and a pendant is hanging mulberries, were dyed a purple tint. So this will be one of the most graphic pieces that you will read and full of imagery. And this makes me so sad we're not in class together reading this because it's so fun to see who picks this up. So unfortunately, I'm just going to have to tell you. So he goes and he's like, remember, he said a coward's way is to wish for death, right? So to wish for something to kill him. So he took his own life. So he did that. So there was a pipe, like a steel rod in the ground that had a hole in the middle. So he took that steel girt and he basically stabbed himself in the stomach with it, deep in his bowels. So his bowels are kind of in his stomach, right? So when he fell to the ground, he was laying on his back, and that pole was sticking out of his stomach, and there was a hole in the center of it. And so basically, the blood was shooting up in the air like a spray of stream. So, like, just coming out, like squirting everywhere. So, when they did that, the blood went into the ground, and where that tree was a had white berries on it, it turned the berries red. So hold on one sec. Sorry, I had to sneeze. So this is kind of interesting because mulberries are red. Like mulberries we see today are red. So this is kind of like a legend of how we got mulberries or how mulberries got their color, which we're going to learn about later, but it's kind of a little precursor to that. So very interesting of his death is what made mulberries turn to that reddish color. So kind of interesting. All right, a couple more slides here. So Thisbe returned, though trembling still with fright, right, because of the lion, for now she thought her love must await her at the tree, and she should haste before he feared for her. So she's like, I've got to get back because he's going to be wondering where I am, right? Longing to tell him of her great escape, she sadly looked for him with faithful eyes. But when she saw the spot in the changed tree, she doubted could they be the same. For so the color of the hanging fruit deceived, right? So when she left, that fruit was white, but when she came back, it was red. So she's like, this can't be the right place, right? While doubt dismayed her on the ground, she saw the wounded body covered with his blood. She started backward, and her face grew pale and ashen, and she shuddered like the sea, which trembles when its face is lightly skimmed by the chill breezes. And she paused a space. But when she knew it was the one she loved, she struck her tender breast and tore her hair. So when she realized it was him, she started like hitting herself in the chest. So she's like striking herself in the chest, and then she started ripping her hair out. She's like tearing at her hair, right? Then right breathing in her arms his love form. So basically she's down and she's holding him now. She bathed the wound with her tears, mingled her grief and his unquenched blood. And as she kissed his death, cold features wailed, "Ah, Pyramus, what a cruel fate has taken thy life away. Pyramus, Pyramus, awake, awake. It is thy dearest Thisbe calls thee. Lift thy drooping heads. Alas, at Thisbe's name he raised his eyes. Through languorous and death and darkness gathered around him as he gazed." So the question was, when Thisbe returns to the meeting place, how does she feel? So we know that she is so upset and so distraught because she just sees his body, right? And it's covered in blood. And then she saw her veil, and near it lay the ivory sheath, but not the trusty sword. And once again she wailed, "Thy own right hand and thy great passion have destroyed thee, and my hand shall be as bold as thine. My love shall nerve me to the fateful deed. Thee I will follow to eternity, though I be censured for the wretched cause, so surely I shall share my wretched fate. Alas, whom death could me alone bereave, thou shalt not from my love be reft by death." So what she's deciding to do here is she is like, you know what? If you're going to die by your own hand, then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to die by my own hand as well. And O ye wretched parents, mine and his, let our misfortunes and our pleadings melt your hearts, that ye no more deny to those whom constant love and lasting death unite. Entomb us in a single sepulture. So a sepulture is a tomb. So she's basically saying, from this point on, anyone who loves each other, let them be together because this is the outcome. We're now going, we're dying or we're going to die because of the fact that you wouldn't let us be together. And oh, thou tree of many branching boughs, spreading dark shadows on the course of one, destined to cover twain. Take thou our fate upon thy head. Mourn our ultimately deaths. Let thy fruit darken for a memory, an emblem of our blood. So basically, here she's just asking for the tree from now on to produce red fruit instead of wine as a memory of what happened. So this is an example of what we went through and we don't want anyone else to go through. So this mulberry tree is now kind of this huge symbolic gesture of love and letting people love and be together. So it's very cool symbolism there. Where did I finish? Uh, no more, she said, and oh wait, no more, she said, and having fixed the point below her breast, so now she has the sword, she fell on the keen sword still warm with his red blood. But though her death was out of nature's law, her prayer was answered, for it moved the gods and moved their parents. Now the gods have changed the ripened fruit which darkens the on the branch, from and from the funeral pile their parents sealed their gathered ashes in a single urn. So the gods basically at the end they answered her prayer. So now the mulberry bush is red. So if you ever see a mulberry bush, it is red. The fruit is red on that. And the parents answered their wish and putting them in a single urn together and entombing them. So, yes. So her dying wish was to change the mulberry bush, right? And then, yes, their wish came true. So, my question at the beginning was, why would we be reading this before we read Romeo and Juliet? And what do we already know about Romeo and Juliet? So, interesting fact, and I'm going to see who has read this or who has watched the video because I'm going to ask you this question in that live session at the beginning. But Romeo and Juliet, obviously, we know is a tragedy, right? It's the love story. They end up dying in the end, right? It's forbidden love. Their parents don't like each other, and they end up dying, right? And then at the end of Romeo and Juliet, we know that the feud ends because of both of the children dying. And so the story is very, very similar, right? So this story was actually written before Romeo and Juliet. So Shakespeare took this story and basically he didn't plagiarize it, but he took the idea from it and he remade this story into Romeo and Juliet. So that's the connection. So that's why we would be reading this first, because you're going to be able to compare and contrast the two and see the differences as you go through and reading. So, but even great writers need to get their ideas from somewhere, right? So Shakespeare got his ideas from somewhere else sometimes, and that is evident in Pyramus and Thisbe. So hopefully that all makes sense. All right, thank you guys, and hopefully this video helps since we could not cover it in Class Connect today.